Billionaire on his deathbed begs his humble employee for one final night. Her response shocks him. Hello, let's hear another incredible story. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. I love narrating stories for you, so get ready, let's start. The penthouse suite of Mount Sinai Hospital gleamed with the same cold perfection as the empire its occupant had built. Moonlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across Italian marble floors and custom mahogany furniture. Even here, in what would likely be his final residence, Jonas Harrington had demanded nothing less than excellence. Serena Wallace stood at the window, her silhouette reflected against the glittering Manhattan skyline. Her dark fingers, absently, traced patterns on the cool glass as she watched the city pulse with life 70 stories below. The soft beeping of medical monitors created a steady rhythm behind her, a mechanical lullaby counting down the remaining heartbeats of one of America's most ruthless real estate magnates. "Ms. Wallace?" The voice was weak, but retained an edge of authority that had once commanded boardrooms and broken competitors. "The morphine, it's wearing off." Turning from the window, Serena moved with practiced grace to Jonas's bedside. In the dim light, his weathered face appeared almost skeletal, skin stretched tight over sharp cheekbones that had once graced the covers of Forbes and Fortune. His ice-blue eyes, however, remained as piercing as ever, following her movements with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Your next dose isn't due for another hour, Mr. Harrington," she said, her voice professional but gentle. "You know we need to be careful with the timing." A dry laugh escaped his throat, ending in a wheeze. "Careful? I'm dying, Miss Wallace. What exactly are we being careful about?" Serena checked his vital signs, her movements efficient but unhurried. 5 years of caring for Jonas had taught her that these moments, these small protests against the protocols and procedures, were less about pain management and more about maintaining some semblance of the control he was rapidly losing. "We're being careful," she replied, adjusting his pillows with firm but gentle hands, "because I promise to keep you comfortable, not to help you leave this world any sooner than necessary." Their eyes met, and something flickered across Jonas's face. Respect, perhaps, or recognition. Serena was the only person in his life who spoke to him this way anymore. His lawyers, his doctors, even his rarely visiting business associates, they all tiptoed around him with practiced deference, treating him like a living legacy rather than a dying man. 34 years old, he murmured, studying her face. "The same age I was when I made my first million." His hand, spotted with age but still steady, reached for the water glass on his bedside table. Serena moved to help him, but he waved her away. "I bought my first building in Hell's Kitchen, turned it into luxury apartments, displaced 67 families." Serena's hand tightened imperceptibly on the rail of his bed. She knew the building he was talking about, knew it intimately. But her face remained composed, professional. "You were quite proud of that achievement, as I recall," she said, referring to one of their many late-night conversations over the years. "The New York Times called it the beginning of your empire." Jonas took a careful sip of water, his eyes never leaving her face. "Pride," he said finally, "is a peculiar thing when you're measuring your remaining days in hours." He set the glass down with deliberate precision. "Do you know what I remember most about that building, Ms. Wallace? Not the profit margin, not the praise from investors. I remember a little girl, couldn't have been more than 7 or 8, standing on the sidewalk with a cardboard box of toys while the marshals cleared out her family's apartment. Something cold settled in Serena's stomach. She busied herself with checking the IV line, hoping the dim light concealed the slight tremor in her hands. "That must have been difficult to witness," she said carefully. "Difficult?" Jonas's laugh was bitter this time. "I didn't find it difficult at all. That was the true beginning of my empire, the moment I realized I could watch a child's world collapse and feel nothing but satisfaction at a deal well executed. The monitors beeped steadily in the silence that followed. Outside, clouds drifted across the moon, momentarily dimming the room. Serena felt the weight of unspoken words pressing against her chest, memories she'd carefully locked away threatening to surface. "And now?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "How does that memory feel now?" Jonas's face contorted. Whether from physical pain or emotional anguish, it was impossible to tell. "Now?" He reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Now I feel everything, Ms. Wallace. Every tear, every broken promise, every life I crushed beneath the foundation of my precious empire. And the feeling—" He drew a shuddering breath. "The feeling is unbearable." Serena gently extracted her hand from his grasp, her professional mask firmly in place, despite the storm of emotions raging beneath the surface. "Perhaps you should try to rest, Mr. Harrington. It's been a long day." "Rest?" His laugh turned into a coughing fit that left him gasping. When he recovered, his eyes held a desperate intensity. "I've been resting for 5 years, watching you move through this room like a ghost of redemption I can't quite grasp. No, Ms. Wallace, I don't want to rest. What I want—" He paused, and for a moment Serena saw something vulnerable flash across his face, something that made him look less like Jonas Harrington, the ruthless billionaire, and more like a man facing the abyss alone. "What I want," he continued softly, "is for you to stay with me tonight, not as my nurse, as a woman who might be willing to listen to the confessions of a dying man, as someone who might—" He hesitated, "who might help me feel human one last time." The request hung in the air. Between them, heavy with implications, Serena stood perfectly still, feeling the weight of the past pressing against her shoulders. In her mind, she saw a different night, a different room, saw her mother's tears, her father's defeated shoulders, a cardboard box of toys scattered across a rain-soaked sidewalk. But when she looked at Jonas now, she saw something else too, something that made her heart twist in ways she hadn't expected. Perhaps it was the moonlight softening his harsh features, or maybe it was the raw honesty in his voice. Whatever it was, it made her next words feel like both a betrayal and a release. "Let me check on my other patients," she said quietly. Then we'll talk." As she left the room, Serena felt Jonas's eyes following her, and she wondered if he could see the trembling of her hands, the slight catch in her breath. She wondered if he had any idea that his request had just set in motion something that neither of them could control. A night that would change everything, reveal everything, and perhaps in some strange way, heal everything. The door closed behind her with a soft click, leaving Jonas alone with the beeping monitors and the weight of his memories. In a few hours, the sun would rise over Manhattan, marking the beginning of what he somehow knew would be his last day on Earth. But for now, in the quiet darkness of his hospital suite, he allowed himself to hope that perhaps redemption wasn't entirely out of reach. The staff break room on the VIP floor was empty at this hour, its silence broken only by the soft hum of a vending machine and the distant sounds of the hospital at night. Serena stood before the small mirror above the sink, her reflection staring back at her with accusations in its eyes. "What are you doing?" she whispered to herself, gripping the edge of the sink until her knuckles turned pale. The memory of Jonas's request echoed in her mind, mingling with older, darker memories she'd spent years trying to suppress. She could still smell the mildew in the basement apartment they'd moved to after the eviction, could still hear her mother's muffled sobs late at night when she thought everyone was asleep, could still feel the shame burning in her chest when she had to tell her teachers they'd moved again and again and again, each new place smaller, darker, further from the life they'd once known. The door creaked open, startling her from her reverie. Regina Chen, the night shift supervisor, poked her head in. "Everything okay with the dragon in his den?" Regina asked, her tired eyes showing genuine concern. In the 5 years Serena had worked here, Regina had become more than a supervisor. She was a confidant, a friend who understood the unique challenges of caring for patients like Jonas Harrington. Serena hesitated, unsure how to describe what had just transpired. "He's asking for company tonight, not medical company." Regina's eyes widened slightly. "Oh, honey, you know that's against every protocol we have. Not to mention ethically questionable, given his condition." "I know." Serena turned away from the mirror, leaning against the sink. "But you didn't see his eyes, Regina. There was something I've never seen before. Vulnerability, truth, maybe even—" "Don't," Regina cut her off gently. "Don't romanticize this, Serena. Jonas Harrington is still Jonas Harrington. The man's built his fortune on broken promises and ruined lives. Whatever he's feeling now, guilt, loneliness, fear, it doesn't change who he is." Serena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of her secret pressing against her chest. "What if I told you there was more to it? What if I told you I had a personal reason to hate him?" Regina pulled up a chair, patting the seat next to her. "Tell me." Over the next 20 minutes, Serena finally released the story she'd held inside for so long. She told Regina about the building in Hell's Kitchen, about being that little girl with the cardboard box of toys, about watching her father, once proud and strong, crumble under the weight of displacement and desperation, about her mother taking on 3 jobs, working herself to exhaustion just to keep them off the streets. "That day changed everything," Serena said, her voice thick with emotion. "We lost more than just an apartment. We lost our sense of security, our dignity. My father never recovered. Died of a heart attack 2 years later. The doctors called it cardiac arrest. But I know. It was a broken heart." Regina sat in stunned silence for a moment. "And Harrington, does he know?" "No." Serena shook her head. "When I applied for this position, I used my married name, Wallace. My maiden name was Roberts. He never made the connection." "But you knew? All this time, you've been caring for the man who destroyed your family's life?" "I took the job because I wanted to see him up close, to understand what kind of monster could do what he did." Serena's laugh was hollow. "But that's the thing about monsters, Regina. The closer you get, the more human they become." Regina reached out, squeezing Serena's hand. "And now, what do you see when you look at him?" "I see." Serena paused, struggling to find the words. "I see a man who's finally facing the cost of his choices. Someone who's realizing too late that all the wealth in the world can't buy back the things that really matter." She stood up, pacing the small room, and the strangest part, sometimes, when he looks at me, I feel something I never expected to feel. Not attraction exactly, but understanding, connection, like we're both trapped in this web of past and present, trying to find our way out. "Serena," Regina's voice was gentle but firm. "What exactly are you considering?" "I don't know." But she did know. The decision had been forming in her mind since she'd left Jonas's room, taking shape like a storm on the horizon. "Maybe this is my chance. Not for revenge. I'm not sure I even want that anymore. But for closure, for both of us." Regina stood, placing her hands on Serena's shoulders. "Listen to me. Whatever you're thinking of doing, remember who you are. You're not just any nurse. You're one of the best I've ever worked with. Your compassion, your professionalism. Don't let one night with a dying man compromise everything you've built." Serena met her friend's concerned gaze. "What if it's not about compromising? What if it's about completing something? A circle that started 27 years ago on that sidewalk in Hell's Kitchen?" The clock on the wall ticked loudly in the silence that followed. Outside the break room, the hospital continued its nighttime rhythm, monitors beeping, nurses making their rounds, life and death playing out their eternal dance in fluorescent-lit corridors. "I can't tell you what to do," Regina finally said, releasing Serena's shoulders. "But whatever you decide, be careful, not just with your job, but with your heart. Sometimes the ghosts we think we're laying to rest have a way of haunting us even more." Serena nodded, gathering her composure. She checked her watch. Nearly time for Jonas's pain medication. "I should go." "Wait." Regina reached into her pocket and pulled out a small key. "The pharmacy sent up his additional morphine prescription. It's in the secure cabinet. You should have it on hand, just in case." Their eyes met, understanding passing between them. They both knew that tonight might be Jonas's last, one way or another. As Serena walked back toward Jonas's suite, the key felt heavy in her pocket. Each step brought her closer to a decision that would change everything, or perhaps had already been made long ago on a rain-soaked sidewalk in Hell's Kitchen, when a little girl with a box of toys first learned about the power of choices and their consequences. She paused outside his door, her hand on the handle. Through the small window, she could see Jonas's profile in the moonlight. His face turned toward the city he'd helped build and destroy and build again. In that moment, he looked neither like a monster nor a dying man, just someone lost in the space between what was and what could have been. Taking a deep breath, Serena opened the door, ready to face whatever the night might bring. The past and present were about to collide, and she could only hope that in the aftermath both she and Jonas might find something neither of them expected: forgiveness. When Serena entered the room, Jonas was sitting up in bed, silhouetted against the Manhattan skyline. He'd managed to pull himself into a more dignified position, and someone, probably one of the day nurses, had helped him change into a silk pajama set that probably cost more than Serena's monthly rent. Even dying, he maintained an air of authority that seemed woven into his very being. "I wasn't sure you'd come back," he said, his voice steadier than it had been earlier. His eyes followed her as she moved through her familiar routine, checking monitors, adjusting tubes, recording numbers in his chart. "I always come back, Mr. Harrington. It's my job." "Not tonight." He caught her wrist as she reached to check his pulse. His grip was gentle but insistent. "Tonight isn't about your job, is it, Serena?" The use of her first name sent a shiver down her spine. In 5 years, he'd never once called her anything but Ms. Wallace. She gently extracted her wrist from his grip and pulled up the chair beside his bed, close enough to speak softly, far enough to maintain some semblance of professional distance. "Why did you ask me to stay?" she questioned, meeting his gaze directly. "There are other ways to find company, even at this hour, ways that wouldn't risk my career." Jonas's laugh turned into a wheezing cough. Serena automatically reached for the water glass, but he waved her away. "Do you think I don't know that? Do you think in all my years, with all my money, I haven't had every kind of company money can buy?" He paused, studying her face in the moonlight. "But you're different. You've always been different." "How so?" "You look at me like I'm human," he said simply. "Not like I'm a bank account or a business opportunity or a tragedy waiting to happen. Just human, flawed, real." He shifted in the bed, wincing slightly. "Do you know how rare that is? To be seen for who you are, not what you own." Serena felt her carefully constructed walls beginning to crack. "And who are you, Mr. Harrington? Really?" "A monster," he replied without hesitation. "A man who built an empire on the tears of others and told himself it was just business." His voice grew softer. "A fool who's realizing too late that all the buildings in New York can't fill the emptiness inside." The honesty in his voice made something twist in Serena's chest. She stood abruptly, walking to the window. The city sprawled below them, a glittering tapestry of lights and shadows. Somewhere out there was the building in Hell's Kitchen, probably renovated beyond recognition now, housing people who had no idea of the lives that had been shattered within its walls. "Tell me about the regrets," she said finally, her back still turned to him. "Not the business ones, the personal ones, the ones that keep you awake at night." There was a long silence, broken only by the steady beeping of monitors. When Jonas spoke again, his voice was different, rougher, more vulnerable. "There was a woman," he began. "Catherine. She was everything I wasn't. Kind, gentle. She saw good in everyone, even me. Especially me." He paused, and Serena could hear him struggling to control his emotions. "I was going to marry her, had the ring and everything. But then the opportunity came, the biggest deal of my career, the one that would put me on the map. What happened? The deal required certain sacrifices, things Catherine wouldn't have understood, or maybe she would have understood too. Well," his voice cracked slightly, "I chose the deal, told myself I'd make it up to her later, that once I had the money and the power I could give her everything she deserved. By the time I realized that what she deserved was someone who would choose her first, she was gone, married to a school teacher in Boston. Happy, from what I heard." Serena turned back to face him. In the dim light, she could see tears tracking down his weathered cheeks. "Did you ever try to find her?" "No." Jonas shook his head slowly. "Some bridges you burn so completely that crossing back becomes impossible. But I think about her sometimes, about the life we might have had, about the man I might have become if I'd made a different choice that day." The weight of his words hung in the air between them. Serena found herself moving back to the chair, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. "Any other regrets?" she asked softly. "Too many to count." He reached for her hand, and this time she didn't pull away. "The families I displaced, the lives I ruined in the name of progress and profit. There was one building in particular." His voice trailed off as he seemed lost in memory. "Hell's Kitchen, my first major acquisition. There was this little girl." Serena's heart began to pound, but she kept her face carefully neutral. "What do you remember about her?" "She was holding a box of toys, standing there in the rain while the marshals cleared out her family's apartment. She looked right at me, right through me, really. Her eyes—" He squeezed Serena's hand. "Sometimes I see those eyes in my dreams, asking me why, asking me if it was worth it." The moment stretched between them, taut with unspoken truths. Serena could feel her pulse racing, could feel the words building in her throat like a storm, about to break. But before she could speak, Jonas continued, "That's why I asked you to stay tonight, Serena. Because somehow when you look at me, I see a chance for, not redemption, I don't deserve that, but maybe understanding, maybe even forgiveness, though God knows I haven't earned it." Serena stood slowly, never breaking eye contact. With deliberate movements, she reached up and unpinned her hair, letting it fall in dark waves around her shoulders. Then she took off her nurse's badge, placing it carefully on the bedside table. "What if I told you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "that forgiveness isn't something you earn? What if it's something you're given even when, especially when, you don't deserve it?" Jonas's eyes widened slightly, something shifting in their icy depths. "Serena, what if I told you," she continued, moving closer, "that sometimes the person you're seeking forgiveness from has been right in front of you all along, watching, waiting, trying to understand how the monster from her childhood could become the man she sees before her now?" Understanding dawned on his face, followed by shock, then something deeper, a recognition that seemed to age him and rejuvenate him all at once. "The little girl," he whispered, "with the box of toys. That was me." Serena's voice was steady now, though her heart was racing. "That was me, Mr. Harrington. And I think it's time we both stopped pretending this night is about anything other than what it really is. A reckoning, a chance to face our ghosts together." The monitors beeped steadily in the silence that followed, marking the heartbeats of two people standing on the edge of something neither of them fully understood. Outside, the city continued its endless dance of light and shadow, unaware that, in the hospital room high above its streets, the past and present were about to collide in ways that would change both forever. The silence that followed Serena's revelation seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. Jonas's face had gone ashen, his hands trembling as they clutched the silk sheets. The city lights through the window cast shifting shadows across his features, making him look almost ghost-like. "Roberts," he whispered finally. "Your family name was Roberts." His eyes took on a distant look, as if scanning through decades of memories. "William Roberts. He came to my office, begged me to reconsider the eviction, said his family had lived in that apartment for 3 generations. He was my father." Serena's voice was steady, though her hands had curled into fists at her sides. "He offered to pay double the rent, triple even, though we both know now he could never have afforded it. I remember," Jonas's voice cracked, "I remember telling him that sentiment had no place in business, that progress couldn't be stopped for the sake of—" He trailed off, horror dawning in his eyes. "Oh God, all these years you've been caring for you, making sure your morphine drip was properly adjusted, cleaning you when you couldn't clean yourself." A bitter laugh escaped her throat. "Life has a strange sense of humor, doesn't it, Mr. Harrington?" She moved to the window, pressing her forehead against the cool glass. Below, emergency vehicles wailed through the streets, their lights creating brief flashes of red and blue against the hospital walls. "Do you know what happened after the eviction? Would you like to hear the rest of the story you set in motion?" Behind her, she heard Jonas shift in his bed. "Please," he said softly, "tell me." We moved into a basement apartment in the Bronx, the kind of place where the walls sweat in summer and freeze in winter. My mother took 3 jobs, cleaning offices at night, watching other people's children during the day, doing laundry on weekends. My father, she paused, swallowing hard. He tried so hard, but something broke in him that day. The proud man who used to carry me on his shoulders, who taught me to read and write before I started school, who promised me the world, he disappeared. In his place was a shadow who could barely look us in the eye. She turned back to face Jonas, and in the dim light she looked both vulnerable and formidable. He died 2 years later. Heart attack, they said. But I watched it happen long before his heart gave out. I watched him die the day you looked him in the eye and told him progress couldn't be stopped. Jonas made a sound, half sob, half groan, and reached for her. "Serena, don't." She held up a hand. "Don't say you're sorry. Not yet. Because that's not even the part that haunts me the most." She moved closer to his bed, her movements deliberate. "What haunts me is what happened next. How my mother looked at me one day, after another double shift, and said, 'Baby, you're going to make something of yourself. You're going to be so successful that men like Jonas Harrington will have to look up to see you.'" A small, sad smile played at her lips. "So I did. I studied until my eyes burned, got scholarships, worked my way through nursing school, graduated top of my class, and then—" She gestured around the luxurious hospital suite. "I came here. To you." "Why?" Jonas's voice was barely audible. "If you knew who I was, why take this assignment?" Serena sat on the edge of his bed, close enough that he could see the unshed tears in her eyes. "At first, I wanted to hate you up close. I wanted to watch you suffer and feel justified, vindicated." She reached out, almost unconsciously, and smoothed a strand of white hair from his forehead. "But then something happened that I didn't expect." "What?" I saw you, really saw you. Not just the ruthless businessman or the dying billionaire, but the man underneath it all. I saw how you flinch when you think no one's watching, like you're carrying a weight too heavy to bear. I saw how you stare at old photographs when you think I'm not looking, touching faces of people long gone with trembling fingers. I saw a monster, Jonas interrupted. You saw a monster trying to hide in human skin. No. Serena's voice softened. I saw someone lost, someone who built an empire of steel and glass, but never learned how to build connections that matter. Someone who's dying not just from cancer, but from the realization that all the power in the world can't buy back a single moment of real love. The monitors beeped steadily in the background as they sat in silence, the weight of decades pressing down on them both. Outside, the sky had begun to lighten imperceptibly, the first hint that dawn wasn't far off. When you asked me to stay tonight, Serena continued, I told myself it was a chance for closure, for revenge maybe. But now, she looked down at her hands, strong hands that had cared for him through countless nights of pain and fear. Now, I'm not sure what this is. Jonas reached out, his weathered hand covering hers. Then let me tell you what it is for me. His voice grew stronger, more urgent. It's a chance I don't deserve, a moment of grace I never earned. You could have let me die alone, Serena. After what I did to your family, some would say you should have, but instead, his voice broke, instead, you've shown me more kindness than anyone in my life ever has. Even now, knowing everything, you're still here. Their eyes met in the semi-darkness, and something electric passed between them. No, not desire exactly, but something deeper. A recognition of shared humanity in all its beautiful, broken complexity. I can't undo what I did, Jonas whispered. I can't bring back your father or give you back those lost years. But I can tell you this. In all my years of building and destroying, of winning and losing, I've never met anyone who's made me question everything like you have. You've made me feel human again, Serena, and that's a gift I can never repay. Serena felt tears slip down her cheeks, but she made no move to wipe them away. Maybe, she said softly, some debts aren't meant to be repaid. Maybe they're meant to be forgiven. She leaned forward, her free hand cupping his cheek. The touch was gentle, intimate in a way that transcended physical desire. It was the touch of someone crossing a bridge between past and present, between vengeance and grace. Tell me more, she whispered. Tell me everything. All the stories, all the regrets, all the moments that brought us here. We have until dawn. Mr. Harrington, let's not waste it. And as the night deepened around them, two souls bound by pain began the delicate dance of healing, one confession at a time. The night had taken on that peculiar quality unique to hospital darkness, a liminal space where time seemed to flow differently, where truths hidden in daylight emerged like moths drawn to flame. Jonas had managed to shift to one side of his bed, making room for Serena to sit more comfortably beside him. Their shoulders nearly touched, both facing the sprawling cityscape beyond the window. Tell me about Catherine, Serena said softly. The woman you could have married, the life you could have had. Jonas's hand trembled as he reached for the water glass. Serena helped him take a sip, their fingers brushing in a way that felt both clinical and intimate. Catherine, he began, his voice rough with memory. Taught art at a community center. In Brooklyn, that's where I met her. I was scouting the property for development. Let me guess, Serena's voice held a gentle irony. You were planning to tear it down. I was. A bitter smile crossed his face. But then I saw her teaching a group of kids how to paint. She had paint smudges on her cheek and this light in her eyes, the kind of light that makes you question everything you thought you knew about value. He paused, lost in the memory. She fought me on the development, of course, organized protests, wrote letters to the editor, rallied the community. And somewhere in the middle of trying to break her resistance, I fell in love with it instead, with her. What happened? I withdrew the development plans, told my board it wasn't the right time, started spending my evenings watching her teach, learning the names of her students, understanding why that decrepit building meant so much to them all. His voice grew softer. For 6 months I lived in a different world, her world, a world where success wasn't measured in square footage and profit margins. Serena shifted to face him better. But you left that world. The Preston Tower deal, and came along. Biggest opportunity of my career, a chance to build the tallest residential building in Manhattan. But there was a catch. He closed his eyes, pain etching deeper lines in his face. The financing came from a group that wanted assurances. They wanted to know I was still the same ruthless developer they'd invested in. They wanted the community center, Serena finished quietly. Yes. The word came out like a confession. They wanted it and 5 other properties in the area. Said it was a package deal. Either I proved my commitment by clearing out all of them, or the Preston Tower deal would go to my biggest competitor. In the silence that followed, Serena could almost see it. The younger Jonas, standing at a crossroads, love in one hand and ambition in the other. You chose the tower. I chose wrong. His voice cracked. I told myself I'd make it up to her somehow. Build her a better community center somewhere else. Give her funding for art programs across the city. But when I went to explain, he trailed off, emotion choking his words. She was already gone, Serena supplied. Left a note, just 3 words. I saw you. Jonas turned to look at Serena, his eyes bright with unshed tears. She saw what I really was, beneath all the justifications and promises, just like you saw me that day in Hell's Kitchen, standing in the rain with your box of toys. Serena felt something shift inside her chest. Not forgiveness, exactly, but understanding. Did you ever try to find her, after you had everything you thought you wanted? Once. He reached into the drawer of his bedside table, pulling out a worn envelope. 10 years ago, I hired investigators, tracked her to Massachusetts. His hands shook as he withdrew a photograph. They sent me this. The photo showed a woman in her 60s, grey-streaked hair pulled back in a loose bun, surrounded by children, with easels and paint sets. Her smile was radiant, her eyes still holding that light Jonas had described. She's still teaching, he said softly. Still changing lives, one paint smudge at a time. He gestured around the opulent hospital suite, while I built towers that reached for the sky but never touched anything real. Serena took the photo, studying it carefully. She looks happy. She does. And that's why I never contacted her. Some paths once abandoned can't be reclaimed. Some choices mark us forever. He turned to Serena, his gaze intense. Like my choice that day in Hell's Kitchen, I've spent 5 years watching you move through this room, seeing echoes of that little girl, in the way you hold yourself, in the strength that radiates from every movement. And I've wondered, what? If God, or fate, or whatever power rules, this universe brought you back into my life as a reminder, a chance to face what I've done before I die. His hand found hers in the dim light. Or maybe as a chance for something else entirely. The monitor's steady beeping filled the silence between them. Outside, the city's lights seemed to pulse with the rhythm of their shared heartbeats. Serena looked down at their joined hands, hers young and strong, his weathered but still elegant. When I was in nursing school, she said finally, we learned about different kinds of healing. Physical healing, of course, the mending of bones and flesh, but also emotional healing, spiritual healing. She squeezed his hand gently. Sometimes The most profound healing happens in the spaces between forgiveness and understanding, in the moments when we see each other not as who we were, but as who we are now. Jonas's breath caught. And who am I now, Serena? When you look at me, what do you see? She turned to face him fully, her free hand rising to cup his cheek. In the dim light, his eyes seemed younger somehow, stripped of the armor he'd worn for so many years. I see a man at the end of his path, finally understanding where he lost his way. I see someone who built an empire but is only now learning the true meaning of value. I see... Her voice faltered as Jonas leaned into her touch, his eyes closing as if in prayer. The intimacy of the moment struck her, not sexual but soul-deep. Here they were, victim and perpetrator, nurse and patient, two souls tangled in a web of past and present, finding something neither of them expected. "I see you," she whispered, "all of you, the monster and the man, the builder and the destroyer, the lost boy who chose wrong and the dying man who finally understands why." A tear slipped down Jonas's cheek, catching on her thumb. When he opened his eyes, they held a vulnerability that made him look both ancient and childlike. "Stay with me," he whispered. "Not just tonight. Stay until the end. Let me spend my last hours learning how to be human again." Outside, the first hints of pre-dawn began to lighten the sky, turning the city's harsh edges soft and dreamlike. In that gentle light, Serena made her choice, not for revenge or redemption, but for something far more complex and beautiful. "I'll stay," she said softly. "We'll face the dawn together." The pre-dawn hour brought a different quality to the hospital suite's darkness. The city lights had dimmed, as if holding their breath for sunrise, and the room felt suspended between night and day, between past and future. Jonas's pain medication was wearing off. Serena could see it in the tight lines around his mouth, in the way his hands occasionally clenched the sheets. "You need your medicine," she said softly, moving to stand. His hand caught her wrist. "Not yet." His voice was strained but determined. "I want to feel everything, even the pain, especially the pain." "Why?" "Because pain means I'm still alive." His eyes met hers in the dim light. "And for the first time in years, I want to feel truly alive. Even if it's just for these last few hours." Serena studied him for a long moment, then made a decision. "There's another way," she said. "Something that might help with the pain without clouding your mind." She moved to her medical bag and retrieved a small bottle of lavender-scented massage oil, something she kept for patients with muscle tension. "My mother used to do this for my father," she explained, warming the oil between her palms. After long days when his body ached too much for sleep, Jonas watched her with a mixture of uncertainty and trust. "You don't have to. I know." She moved to his side, her voice gentle but firm. "Take off your shirt." He complied slowly, his movements stiff with pain and age. The silk pajama top slid away to reveal his torso, thin now, marked by time and illness, but still bearing traces of the strong man he'd once been. A canvas of life lived hard and fast, now fading slowly. Serena's hands moved with professional confidence, finding the knots of tension in his shoulders, the places where pain had made its home. But there was something else in her touch too, a tenderness that transcended mere clinical care. "Tell me about your mother," Jonas said suddenly, his voice rough with emotion. "The woman who taught you this kind of healing." Serena's hands paused briefly before continuing their gentle work. "Rosa Roberts, she is the strongest person I've ever known. After we lost the apartment after my father died, she never broke. Bent sometimes, but never broke." Her fingers worked their way down his spine, feeling the knobs of vertebrae, through paper-thin skin. She used to come home late from cleaning offices, her hands raw from chemicals. But she'd still find the energy to help me with homework, to tell me stories about her own mother's healing hands. "Is she still alive?" Jonas asked softly. "Yes, living in North Carolina now with my sister." A small smile touched Serena's lips. "She has a garden, grows her own herbs for healing, finally living the life she always dreamed of, even if it came later than she hoped." Jonas's breath caught as her hands found a particularly tender spot. "Does she know about you working here? About me?" "No." Serena's movements remained steady, though her voice wavered slightly. "Some truths are too complicated to explain. How do I tell her that I've spent 5 years caring for the man who changed our lives, that I've seen your humanity, your suffering, that tonight—" She trailed off, her hands stilling on his shoulders. Jonas reached up, covering one of her hands with his own. The touch was electric, charged with something neither of them could name. "Tonight what?" he whispered. Serena closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of his skin beneath her palms, the steady thrum of his pulse. "Tonight, I'm learning that forgiveness isn't something you plan. It's something that happens to you, like rain or sunrise or falling," Jonas finished, his voice barely audible. The word hung between them, heavy with implication. Serena opened her eyes to find Jonas had turned his head to look at her. In the growing pre-dawn light, his face held a vulnerability that made her heart ache. "Yes," she said softly, "like falling." With movements that felt both deliberate and dreamlike, she came around to face him. Her hands, still fragrant with lavender oil, cupped his face. His skin was warm beneath her touch, alive with a vitality that defied his condition. "I've imagined this moment so many times," Jonas confessed, his voice rough. "Not just since I asked you to stay tonight. For years. Watching you move through this room, seeing the grace in every gesture. I told myself it was wrong to want this, that I didn't deserve." "Shh." Serena's thumb brushed across his lips, silencing him. "Tonight isn't about deserving, it's about choosing. And I choose this." She leaned forward, closing the distance between them. Their lips met softly at first, a whisper of contact that sent shivers through both of them. Then Jonas's hand came up to tangle in her hair, and the kiss deepened into something both tender and desperate. Time seemed to stop, the monitors beeping, fading into background noise as they explored this new territory between them. When they finally parted, both were breathing heavily, but it was more than physical exertion that made their hearts race. "My God," Jonas breathed, resting his forehead against hers. "I never thought, never dreamed." "I know." Serena's hand slid down to rest over his heart, feeling its strong, steady beat. "Neither did I." They stayed like that for a long moment, breathing each other's air, letting the reality of what had just happened settle around them. Outside, the sky had begun to lighten imperceptibly, the first hints of dawn touching the horizon. "What happens now?" Jonas asked, his voice carrying a trace of fear, not of death, but of this newfound vulnerability between them. Serena pulled back just enough to meet his gaze. In his eyes, she saw everything, regret and hope, pain and pleasure, the past they couldn't change, and the precious few hours they had left. "Now," she said softly, "we stop talking. We stop thinking about tomorrow or yesterday. We just be together for whatever time we have left." She kissed him again, and this time there was no hesitation, no ghost of past wrongs between them. There was only the present moment, the warmth of skin on skin, the miracle of two souls finding connection in the most unlikely of places. As the night gave way to dawn, they created their own kind of healing, one touch, one kiss, one breath at a time. The first rays of sunlight crept through the window, painting golden stripes across the rumpled bedsheets. Serena sat in the armchair beside Jonas's bed, wrapped in his silk robe, watching his chest rise and fall with each breath. They'd shared something profound in the darkness, not just physical intimacy, but a connection that transcended their complicated history. Jonas stirred, his eyes opening slowly. For a moment he seemed confused, then his gaze found her and softened with recognition. "I thought I'd dreamed you," he said, voice rough with sleep and emotion. "No dream." She moved, to sit on the edge of his bed, taking his hand in hers. His skin felt cooler now, and she noticed his breathing had become more labored. The reality of their situation pressed against her chest like a weight. "Do you regret it?" he asked, studying her face in the morning light. "What happened between us?" Serena considered the question carefully. "No," she finally said, "not the way you might think. I regret that we needed all this pain and history to find our way here. I regret that we're meeting at the end instead of the beginning. But last night," she squeezed his hand, "last night was a kind of truth I never expected to find." Jonas attempted to sit up, and she helped adjust his pillows, noting how much weaker his movements had become in just a few hours. "I need to tell you something," he said once he was settled. "Something I've never told anyone." "I'm listening." He reached for the water glass, and she helped him take a sip before he continued. "That building in Hell's Kitchen, your building, it wasn't just business. I had a personal reason for wanting it." Serena felt her body tense, but she kept her expression open. "Tell me." "My father grew up there," Jonas said, his voice taking on a distant quality. "In apartment 3B, right above your family's unit. He used to tell stories about it, about the community, the way neighbors looked out for each other. But mostly he talked about how it held him back." He paused, gathering strength. "He was a bitter man, my father. Blamed that building and its people for his lack of success. Said their kindness and community spirit made him soft when he should have been tough." A harsh laugh escaped him, ending in a cough. "On his deathbed, he made me promise to tear it down if I ever got the chance. Said it would prove I was stronger than he was. So when the opportunity came, I told myself it was just business. Urban renewal, progress." Jonas's eyes filled with tears. "But really, I was still that boy trying to prove something to a dead man who never knew how to love." He turned to look at her, his gaze intense. "When I saw you that day with your box of toys, you reminded me of myself at that age. But where I'd been lonely, you were loved. Where I'd been bitter, you had hope. And some dark part of me wanted to destroy that," Serena finished quietly. "Yes." The word came out like a confession. "God help me, yes. But watching you now, seeing the woman you've become despite everything I did, I realized something." He reached up to touch her face, his fingers trembling. "Your father gave you something mine never could. He taught you how to bend without breaking, how to hold on to love even when everything else is lost." Serena felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "He would have forgiven you, you know, if he'd lived." "That's the kind of man he was." "I know." Jonas's voice was barely a whisper now. "I see it in you, that same capacity for grace. It's what drew me to you all these years, even before I knew who you were. Your ability to look at broken things and see possibility instead of ruin." The morning sun had fully risen now, flooding the room with light that seemed too bright, too honest for the weight of their confessions. Jonas's breathing had grown more labored, and Serena's medical training told her what her heart wasn't ready to accept. Time was running out. "There's something else," Jonas said, struggling to sit up straighter. "In my desk, top drawer, a letter." Serena moved to the elaborate desk in the corner, opening the drawer he'd indicated. Inside was a thick envelope, sealed and heavy with what felt like legal documents. "Read it," he urged. "Please, while I can still see your face." With trembling fingers, Serena opened the envelope. Inside were two items, a legal document and a handwritten letter. Her eyes scanned the legal text first, and she felt her breath catch. "Jonas!" She looked up at him, shock written across her features. "This is the deed to the Hell's Kitchen building, and papers transferring ownership to a non-profit foundation, one that will preserve it as affordable housing in perpetuity." He managed a small smile. "The foundation's board will be controlled by the current tenants, with one permanent seat reserved for a member of the Roberts family." Serena's hands shook as she unfolded the letter. It was dated 3 years ago, written in Jonas's stronger hand. "Dear Miss Wallace, or should I say Miss Roberts, yes, I've known who you are for the past 2 years. Not from the beginning, I'm not that prescient. But once I realized, I couldn't bring myself to say anything. Your care, your dignity, your grace in the face of our shared history, it humbled me in ways I never expected. I've spent my life building towers that reach for the sky, but you've taught me that true legacy isn't measured in stories of steel and glass. It's measured in the lives we touch, the wounds we heal, the wrongs we right while we still have time. This building belongs to you, to your family, to your community, to the spirit of the man whose heart I helped break. I know it doesn't make up for the past, but perhaps it can help build a better future. With deepest respect and endless regret, Jonas Harrington." Serena lowered the letter, her vision blurred with tears. 3 years, she whispered. "You've known for 3 years? And watched you every day, marveling at your strength, your compassion." His voice was growing weaker. "I wanted to tell you so many times, but I was afraid." "Afraid of what?" "That you'd leave, that I'd lose the only real connection I had left in this world." He reached for her hand. "Selfish to the end, aren't I?" Serena moved back to his side, taking his hand in both of hers. "No," she said softly, "not selfish. Human. Beautifully, brokenly human." The morning light streamed through the windows, turning his white hair to silver, softening the harsh lines of age and illness on his face. For a moment, she could see the man he might have been in another life, the man he was becoming in these final hours. "Stay with me," he whispered, his grip on her hand weakening. "Until—" "I'm not going anywhere," she promised, lifting his hand to her lips. "We'll see this through together." Outside, the city was waking up, unaware that in a sunlit room high above its streets, 2 souls were finding peace in the space between ending and beginning. Mid-morning light filled the hospital suite, but Jonas's breath had grown more labored, each intake a visible struggle. Serena had resumed her professional duties, checking vitals, adjusting medication, recording numbers that told a story she didn't want to read. Her medical training warred with her heart, knowing what the declining numbers meant. "Tell me," Jonas said suddenly, his voice weak but urgent. "Tell me what you're seeing in those charts." Serena hesitated, her pen hovering over the medical record. "Jonas, please." His eyes found hers, clear despite his failing body. "I need to know how much time we have left." Setting down the chart, she moved to sit beside him, taking his hand in hers. His skin felt cool to the touch, his pulse thready beneath her fingers. "Your oxygen levels are dropping," she said softly. "Your heart rate is becoming irregular, and your blood pressure—" "How long?" "Hours," she whispered, her professional composure cracking. "Maybe less." He nodded slowly, as if confirming something he'd already known. "Then help me up." "What?" "No, you need to rest. What I need," he said with a flash of his old authority, "is to hold you one last time, properly, standing." "Jonas, you're too weak. Please." The word was both command and plea. "Let me have this one last dance with you." Serena looked at him. Really looked at him. Behind the physical weakness, she saw a fierce determination in his eyes, a need to claim this final moment of dignity. Slowly, she nodded, "We'll do it carefully," she said, switching into nurse mode while her heart hammered in her chest. She disconnected his non-essential monitors, leaving only the portable oxygen. With practiced movements, she helped him swing, his legs over the side of the bed. "Ready?" she asked, positioning herself to support his weight. Jonas took a deep breath, bracing himself. "Ready." Together, they managed to get him standing. He swayed slightly, but Serena's strong arms steadied him. He was taller than she'd realized. Even stooped with age and illness, he still towered over her. For a moment, they stood there, adjusting to this new dynamic, his hospital gown brushing against her scrubs. "Music," he murmured. "We need music." Serena reached for her phone with one hand, keeping the other firmly around his waist. "Any requests?" "Something slow. Something," he smiled faintly. "Something worthy of a last dance." She scrolled through her playlist and selected "What a Wonderful World" by Louis Armstrong. As the first gentle notes filled the room, Jonas pulled her closer, one hand clasping hers, the other resting at her waist. They began to sway, more standing embrace than true dance. Through her arms, Serena could feel how much effort it took for him to remain upright, how each movement cost him precious energy. But she could also feel something else, a kind of peace flowing between them, as if in these moments they'd transcended their complicated history. "I never told you," Jonas said softly, his breath warm against her hair, "about the first time I saw you, not as a child, but here in the hospital. Tell me now." "You were at the nurse's station, arguing with Dr. Richards about a patient's pain medication. So fierce, so certain." His voice grew wistful. "You reminded me of Catherine. That same fire, that same unwavering commitment to what's right. But there was something else too, something entirely your own, a strength that came from knowing exactly who you were and what you'd overcome." Serena pressed closer, supporting more of his weight as she felt him weaken. "I was terrified that day," she admitted, "terrified he wouldn't listen, that my patient would suffer needlessly, but I couldn't back down. You never did. Not once in 5 years." His fingers tightened slightly on hers. "That's when I started falling, I think. Long before I knew who you were, long before I deserved even a moment of your attention." The music swelled around them, Louis Armstrong's gravelly voice, singing about trees of green and red roses too. They turned slowly, sunlight dancing across their intertwined forms, casting a single shadow on the polished floor. "Do you know what I regret most?" Jonas asked, his voice growing fainter. "Tell me. Not the buildings I built or the deals I made, not even the lives I disrupted, though God knows I regret those too." He pulled back slightly to look into her eyes. "I regret all the moments I could have chosen love and chose power instead. All the times I could have reached out but pulled back. All the years I wasted being afraid of appearing weak." Serena felt tears slip down her cheeks. "You're not weak now." "No," he agreed softly. "For the first time in my life, I'm finally strong enough to be vulnerable, to say what needs to be said while there's still time." His legs buckled slightly, and she tightened her hold. "I love you, Serena Roberts. Wallace, not despite our history, but because of it. Because you showed me that true strength lies in the capacity to forgive, to heal, to love, even when every logical reason says you shouldn't." The music was fading now, the last notes of the song drifting away like autumn leaves. Jonas's breathing had become more labored, and Serena could feel him trembling with exhaustion. "We should get you back to bed," she said gently. Just one more moment." His voice was barely a whisper now. "Let me hold on to this feeling a little longer." They stood there, swaying slightly as the next song began, La Vie en Rose. Jonas smiled faintly. "Perfect," he murmured, "when everything you see is rosy." But before he could finish the thought, his knees gave way. Serena caught him, her nursing training taking over as she helped him back to the bed. His face had gone grey, his breathing shallow and rapid. "I'm sorry," he gasped as she reconnected the monitors. "Sorry to cut our dance short." "Shh." She stroked his face, her touch both professional and intimate. "You were magnificent." The monitors began to beep more urgently, their rhythm irregular. Jonas reached for her hand, his grip surprisingly strong. "Promise me," he said, fighting for each word. "Promise me you'll use the foundation to help others, to make sure no other little girl loses her home, her father." "I promise." She leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. "I promise to make it mean something." His free hand came up to touch her cheek, fingers trembling. "It already does," he whispered. "You already do." Outside, the morning sun had reached its full strength, flooding the room with golden light. In that radiance, Serena held onto Jonas's hand and watched as the man who had once seemed a monster transformed one final time. Not into an angel, but into something far more precious. A human being who had finally learned how to love. The monitor's erratic beeping had become a countdown, marking time in precious heartbeats. Regina appeared at the door, drawn by the changing rhythms and flashing alerts. Her eyes widened at the sight before her. Serena perched on the edge of Jonas's bed, still in his silk robe, holding his hand as if it were the most precious thing in the world. "Serena," Regina said softly, "the day shift will be here soon. Do you want me to—" "No." Serena's voice was firm, though her eyes never left Jonas's face. "I'm staying. I need to see this through." Regina nodded, understanding passing between them. She moved to check the monitors, her experienced eyes taking in the declining numbers. "I'll hold them off as long as I can," she promised, squeezing Serena's shoulder before quietly leaving the room. Jonas stirred, his eyes fluttering open. They were clouded now, but still seeking Serena's face. "Tell me," he whispered, "about the building. What will you do with it?" Serena stroked his hair back from his forehead, her touch gentle. "I'll restore it," she said, letting the vision form as she spoke. "Not to its original state. That's gone forever, but to something new. Something that honors what was lost while building something better." "Tell me more." His voice was fading, but the interest in his eyes was genuine. "The ground floor will become a community center," she continued, her free hand still clasped in his. "Art classes like Catherine taught, after-school programs for kids who need a safe place to dream, and upstairs—" She smiled softly. "Upstairs will be homes, real homes, not just apartments, for families who need a chance, who deserve to put down roots without fear of being torn away." "Your mother," Jonas paused, fighting for breath. "Would she come back? To see it?" "Yes." Serena felt tears spring to her eyes. "She would, and she'd bring her herbs and her healing wisdom. Maybe teach the children about natural remedies, about the power of gentle hands and open hearts." "And your father?" The question was barely audible. "He'd be there too," Serena whispered. "Not physically, but in every nail we drive, every wall we paint, every family we welcome home. His spirit of kindness, of dignity." She had to pause. Emotion, joking her words. "It will be the foundation of everything we build." Jonas's grip on her hand tightened fractionally. "Then it's worth it," he said. "All of it, every choice, every mistake, every moment that led us here." His eyes found hers, suddenly clear and intense. "Because in the end, love wins. Not the way we expect, but the way we need." The monitor's beeping grew more irregular. Serena's medical training told her what was coming, but her heart wasn't ready. "Not yet. I need to tell you something," she said urgently. "Something I've realized." "Tell me." His voice was thread-like now, but focused entirely on her. "What we shared last night, it wasn't just about forgiveness or healing or even love, though it was all of those things." She leaned closer, making sure he could hear every word. "It was about redemption, not just yours, but mine too. Because as long as I held onto that little girl's pain, as long as I saw you only as the monster who destroyed my family's life, I was trapped too." Jonas's eyes filled with tears. "And now I understand that life isn't just about what breaks us, it's about what we build from the pieces." She brought his hand to her lips, kissing his knuckles softly. "You took our home, yes. But in doing so, you set in motion events that would lead me here, to this moment, to this understanding, to a kind of love I never thought possible." "What kind of love?" Each word seemed to cost him tremendous effort now. "The kind that transcends right and wrong, past and present. The kind that looks at a dying man and sees not what he was, but what he's become. What we've become together." She touched his face gently. "I love you, Jonas Harrington. Not despite our history, but because of how we've transformed it into something beautiful." A single tear slid down his cheek. "Say it again," he whispered. "My name, the way you say it now. Jonas." She leaned down, pressing her forehead to his. "My Jonas." His breath hitched, a smile touching his lips. "That's what I've waited all my life to hear. Someone saying my name with love." The monitor's beeping grew more sporadic. Outside, the morning had fully bloomed, sunlight streaming through the windows and turning the room into a cathedral of light. In that radiance, Serena held onto Jonas's hand and watched as peace slowly settled over his features. "I'm tired," he murmured. "So tired." "Then rest," she whispered, her voice thick with tears. "Rest in the knowledge that you are loved, that you will be remembered not for the towers you built, but for the bridges you built between hearts. Rest knowing that your last choice was your best choice. To love, to heal, to make amends." His eyes found hers one last time, and in them she saw everything: regret and redemption, pain and peace, and most of all, a love that had bloomed against all odds in the winter of his life. "Thank you," he breathed, "for teaching me how to be human again." The monitors continued their irregular symphony, but Serena barely heard them. In these precious moments, she was focused entirely on Jonas's face, on the way the morning light softened his features, on how the man who had once seemed a giant of industry now appeared as fragile and beautiful as fallen snow. She held his hand and waited, knowing that sometimes the greatest act of love is simply being present as someone you love slips away into the light. The morning Jonas Harrington died was uncommonly beautiful. The sun had just reached its zenith when his final breath escaped like a whisper, his hand growing slack in Serena's grip. The monitor's frantic beeping gave way to a single sustained tone that seemed to stretch into eternity. Serena reached out with trembling fingers and silenced the monitor. In the sudden quiet, she could hear the city living and breathing beyond. The window, traffic flowing, birds calling, life continuing its relentless march forward. She sat there for a long moment, still holding his hand, watching how the sunlight played across his peaceful features. "Goodbye, my love," she whispered, leaning down to press one final kiss to his forehead. The door opened softly behind her. Regina stood there, accompanied by Dr. Richards and the day shift staff. They paused, taking in the scene before them. Serena in Jonas's silk robe, the rumpled sheets, the profound intimacy of the moment. "Time of death," Dr. Richards began mechanically, but Regina touched his arm. "Give her a moment," she said, softly. Some endings deserve their own time. Serena squared her shoulders and stood, transforming back into the professional they all knew. 10:47 a.m., she said clearly, her voice steady despite the tears on her cheeks. Mr. Harrington passed peacefully with... She paused, then lifted her chin. With love at his side. The next few hours passed in a blur of necessary procedures and paperwork. Serena changed back into her scrubs, watching as they prepared Jonas's body, as the suite was slowly stripped of the personal touches that had made it his home for the past 5 years. Each removed item felt like another goodbye. It was late afternoon when Regina found her in the break room, staring at a cup of cold coffee. The lawyers are here, she said gently. They need to speak with you. Serena nodded, unsurprised. In addition to the building, she'd found other papers in Jonas's desk, documents naming her as executor of his estate, transferring significant portions of his fortune to the foundation she would oversee. His final gift, ensuring that his wealth would finally serve the purpose of healing rather than destruction. There's something else, Regina added, sliding an envelope across the table. We found it in his nightstand. It's addressed to you. Serena's hands shook as she opened the envelope. The letter inside was written in Jonas's unsteady hand, dated from just a few days ago. My dearest Serena, if you're reading this, our time together has come to an end. I find myself hoping that when the moment came, I had the courage to tell you everything, about knowing who you were, about how you changed me, about the love that grew in my heart despite all logic and reason. But in case I failed in that, in case fear or pride or weakness held me back, let me say it now. You saved me, not from death that was always coming, but from dying as the same man who destroyed your family's life all those years ago. You saved me by showing me that it's never too late to choose love over fear, healing over harm, truth over pride. The building is yours now, along with the means to make it something beautiful. But my true legacy to you isn't material. It's the lesson you taught me, that love can bloom in the most unlikely soil, that redemption comes in unexpected forms, that sometimes the greatest gift we can give another person is the chance to forgive us. I love you, Serena Roberts Wallace. I love the little girl with the box of toys who showed me the cost of my choices. I love the woman who cared for me with dignity when I deserved none. I love the soul who saw past my monstrous facade to the human being struggling to emerge, build something magnificent, not just with bricks and mortar, but with the love you carry in your heart. Let my last gift to the world be your vision of what's possible when we choose to heal rather than hurt. And know that somewhere, somehow, I will always be dancing with you in that golden morning light. Forever yours, Jonas. Serena pressed the letter to her chest, feeling her heart break and heal simultaneously. Through her tears, she saw Regina watching her with concern. What will you do now? Her friend asked softly. Serena stood and walked to the window. From here, she could just make out the outline of Hell's Kitchen in the distance. First, she said, I'm going to North Carolina. There's someone I need to tell this story to, someone who needs to know that sometimes the greatest acts of healing come from the most unexpected sources. Your mother? Yes, Serena smiled through her tears. And then we're going to build something beautiful. A place where art and healing and community can flourish, where children can grow up without fear of being uprooted, where love wins. He'd be proud of that, Regina said softly. He is proud, Serena corrected, touching the letter over her heart. Wherever he is now, he's proud, and he's finally, truly, at peace. The setting sun painted the city in shades of gold and rose, reminiscent of that morning's dance. In the deepening twilight, Serena could almost feel Jonas's arms around her, could almost hear the music playing softly in her memory. She closed her eyes and allowed herself to sway slightly, dancing with his ghost one last time. When she opened them again, her path was clear. She would take this love, this unexpected, transformative, impossible love, and build something lasting from it. Not a tower reaching for the sky, but a foundation reaching for the heart. A place where other broken souls could find healing, where other wounded hearts could learn to love again. In the end, that would be their true legacy, not the story of a dying billionaire and the nurse who forgave him, but the eternal truth that love, real love, has the power to transform even the deepest wounds into windows of light. Outside, the city lights began to twinkle on one by one, like stars being born in the gathering darkness. Somewhere in that glittering tapestry was the future Serena would build, a future born from a single night of truth and tenderness, a future that would stand as testament to the fact that sometimes, just sometimes, love is stronger than death itself. And in that knowledge, she found her peace. The end. Thanks for watching to the end. Did you like the story? Tell us what you thought in the comments below. We want to know what you think. Don't forget to leave your like and subscribe now for more exciting stories you won't want to miss. Activate the bell to be notified whenever a new video comes out. See you in the next story. See you there.